how to grow brands in a digital age. I'll be dead honest with you up front. I'll let you in on a little secret. There is no one silver bullet to this. I haven't got a really easy, neat, singular answer that you can walk away and say, right, well, at least I know the answer to that question. Part of the joy of this event is going to be that we're going to hear lots of different points of view. I know Nick's stuff in the curve is going to be different from, it's going to cast a very specific, very distinct light on this topic. So we're going to see some very different perspectives. I think that's part of the fun of this. There is no one silver bullet. Because if you ask 100 marketeers this question, I bet you'd get 100 different answers. I think we all ask ourselves, how does a brand really grow? You get a load of different thoughts going through your head. We could do promotions, we could try discounts, maybe just raise the price, loyalty schemes, big ad campaigns, we'll just stretch the brand, we'll do MPD, brand extension. I just read a thing about engagement, surely the answer's that. I asked my cabbie on the way here this morning, who explained what he was calling referral marketing, which turned out to be a giant pyramid scheme that he was in. And there's monkey tennis. If we get really stuck, there is always monkey tennis as a solution. You ask 100 marketeers, I'll bet you'll get 100 different answers. Which is why, about 15 years ago, I became really absorbed in the work of these two guys, Professor Ehrenberg and Dr. Byron Sharp. Because for the first time, they said, I think we've worked this out. I think if you really academically, deeply, dispassionately study the data, they said, there's some really basic rules. There's some analysis of data which gives us an answer to this. And I became really interested in this because it gave me, for the first time, something that cut through 1 million different answers to that question. And here's their famous grid, okay? So I don't often present famous grids. Here is a famous grid. And if you get your head around this grid, the whole rest of the day is okay. This is their famous grid. This is the ranking of coffee brands in America, so some of which you'll recognize, some of which as Brits we don't. This is the ranking of coffee brands by market share, okay? Biggest to smallest. And he looked at the data by asking two questions. There's the number of people who use the brand, total user base, and there's the amount of times they use it. How many times in an average period do they use it? Just out of interest, who thinks a brand grows by driving this number? Who thinks penetration is a guide to how big your brand is in the market? A handful. Who thinks it's bigger brands they get bought more, they get used more? Okay, so we've got a mixture of opinion, which is good. Here's what Ehrenberg said. He said, market share is always strongly correlated with the total size of the user base. You have a look at a brand's penetration, and it will always mirror the hierarchy of market share. And actually these numbers, the average number of purchases, loyalty metrics, frequency metrics, are nearly always clinging to a kind of norm, clinging to a mean. They're always quite close. He often found that the top brands did a bit better. He called it double jeopardy. He said big brands, because they're market leader, tend to have a slightly higher frequency figure, partly because they get stocked in more places, partly they're people's second choices if their first brand runs out. But on the whole, those averages held. And being academics, they researched it to death. They looked at hundreds of categories and hundreds of situations and 20 countries. They looked at 40 years worth of data. Out of interest, they found one instance where this didn't hold. And they were looking through TV data. They were looking at, do TV channels behave in the same way? Is it the amount of viewers they get in total, or is it the amount of hours these viewers view? And the only instance they ever found that broke the mold was extreme religious broadcasting in America, where seemingly a handful of lunatics watch lots and lots and lots and lots, and it's nothing to do with your total user base. So extreme religious broadcasting in America aside, this is their finding. This is 15 years ago, and they researched it to death. I, at the time, was working on Weetabix. So I couldn't resist doing this for myself. I thought, well, if this works, I've got a dynamite story to go back to the fields of Nottinghamshire with. And it held almost perfectly. Market size was here. Penetration ran smoothly without a glitch. And these numbers, being a qualitative researcher, I tend to squint. I do the squint test. They all look about 4 to me. They all cling to a kind of average. So there I was. 15 years ago, I was happy, okay? This worked for Weetabix and all seemed to be okay. And these were the 2 findings. This, in a nutshell, for the back of your, for the back pocket, here's the findings from Byron Sharp and Andrew Ehrenberg. Competitive brands tend not to differ much in loyalty levels. Loyalty tends to be pretty average. The big difference is in the size of the user base. And that led to Byron Sharp's book a couple of years ago, How Do Brands Grow? You grow this. You just grow the size of the user base. He was dead clear. By that book, he said, forget everything else. Growing brands is dead easy. The analogy or metaphor that made it make most sense to me was this. If you're trying to win an election, not in America, obviously, if you're trying to win an election anywhere else, all you need is the most number of votes. It's all you need. You don't need them to be party members. You don't need them to have signed up to your newsletter. You don't need them to be canvassing for you. You don't need money from them. All you need is the most number of votes. And he said growing a brand is exactly like this. We should just pretend we're trying to win an election. That made it the most sense to me. That was 15 years ago. And over 15 years, certain questions have grown in my mind. Certain things haven't quite sat right with me about these findings. Is it the same? Do these rules hold in a digital world? When Ocado refills my basket, am I shopping in the same way as I used to when I went to the supermarket? I kind of get what they're talking about in a world of supermarkets and boxes and shelves and having to go and get your shopping. But we all live in a weird world now where 3 clicks later, I've got a pair of jeans on the way. That's different. Is it the same when Amazon is recommending stuff to me? Is it the same when I can do 1-click buying and literally in 10 minutes I could have hundreds of pounds worth of shopping on its way? The Kindle store can't be like a normal bookshop, can it? These were all the questions I had that I wanted to find out if Byron Sharp stuff held in a digital world, in this odd, accelerated, weird world that we now live in. Is it the same?